Hello there, I'm a day late reviewing 1991's There's Nothing Out There. Now I first saw this on VHS back in the early 90s, and I loved it. There's Nothing Out There is a comedy/horror film that is self-aware very much in the manner of Scream, only it came out 5 years before Scream. So it should probably be said that Scream is self-aware much in the way that There's Nothing Out There. But hardly anyone has seen There's Nothing Out There, which is a shame because it's very clever and quite silly at times. But I gotta warn you, this is grade Z schlock. And by grade Z schlock, I mean this is literally the first film many of the cast and crew have done, and there's almost no budget to do it with. Ostensibly, it's a horror movie, as the story is about a monster terrorizing a group of teens at a home in the woods. Seems oddly familiar.
Are you even listening to me?
No, the house by the pond.
Unlike Cabin in the Woods, there's almost no tension in this film, but there is a bunch of comedy, much of which is pretty good. My biggest complaint would be that the character Mike, who loves horror movies and tries to warn his friends about their impending doom. I find him to be a bit too snarky for my taste as an adult, but the movie was written by a teenager in the late 80s, so it's understandable. Heck, I remember what I was like as a teenager in the 80s, so while it's understandable, he can still be quiet and annoying at times. So you've been warned. That said, short review, I enjoyed it. It's pretty funny, check it out. Long review, are you ready for some grade Z schlock? Spoilers ahead. We open in a staple of the 80s and 90s, the video store. Some of you may remember these. But for those of you that don't, back in the dark ages of man, before streaming movies on your phone or TV, people used to go to stores and rent movies on VHS tapes, and then later DVDs. They would then take them back home and watch them for a day or two before returning them to the video store. So at our video store we see a young girl who is the clerk for the store, and she is reading a magazine when a customer all dressed in black enters the store. He picks up a movie box and throws it on the counter, and the girl looks up from her magazine only to not see the customer. Maybe he's looking for another movie. She turns to get the videotape off of the rack when a hand tries to grab her. She makes a break for it, but the customer blocks the doorway. She falls down and crab walks backward away from the man. All the while, screams and growls issue from the horror video boxes surrounding her. The customer starts throwing videotape onto the girl, who backs into a dead end. The girl gets up and makes a break for it. The videotape is tangled around her and she falls off the back porch with the hint that she is hanged. But it turns out that it was all just a dream.
Honey, honey, wake up. You won't believe the dream I just had.
Worse still, it was a very bad time to be dreaming, as our young girl was driving at the time. She crashes and is a bit dazed, but otherwise okay. Then a green falling orb lands in a puddle next to the car. Soon, two tentacles reach out of the water and try to get her. The tentacles smash the car windows, and then the girl screams and we see a tentacle lunge at the camera. Cut to opening credits. Open in a high school. It is the last day of school before spring vacation, and the kids are counting the seconds until they are free. Once the bell rings, we meet our group of future monster chow. Meet Nick. His parents have a vacation house out in the woods, and he is willing to share it with his friends in the time-honored tradition of high school partying. We have 3 couples and the 7th wheel, Mike. As they drive off to the cabin, they pass an accident scene. It's the car the girl was driving in the opening. The car is beat up and turned on its side now. We hear a comment that there is no body, and Mike warns the others that this is a warning. They should turn back now before the killing starts. The others pshaw the idea, saying he's being silly, and they continue on their way. Once they get to the house, the girls are impressed by the beauty of the woodland scenery and how nice the house is. Mike, on the other hand, is not sold. He's positive that they're going to be axe murdered during the night. After everyone goes into the house, a van full of traditional 1980s Friday the 13th cannon fodder drives up and decides to take a dip in the pond. This leads to what video producer Mo Fuzz likes to refer to as production value.
There's only one thing that adds real production value.
What's that?
Tits and ass.
Mike brings their arrival to the attention of Nick, who kicks them out of his pond. Mike then says that this is another sign of their impending doom.
Look, don't you know what just happened? Those kids were born to be murder victims and just paid us a visit. Don't you realize the significance of that?
They go back inside and get ready for dinner. Stacy is cooking while Nick sets the table. Later, as they are sitting outside and eating, they hear a noise in the kitchen. Since Mike has them all a bit spooked with his talk of there being some sort of killer in the woods, they all go to see what caused the noise. It was a pan that Stacy had the rest of the chicken in. Oddly enough, the chicken is gone and there's some green slime left behind. This kills the appetite of everyone, and Janet asks David if she would like to go for a walk in the woods, while Jimmy and Doreen decide to go skinny dipping. Mike is sure these are bad ideas, but everyone is getting sick of listening to him rant about horror movies, so they decide to go ahead and do it anyways.
Let's hide behind the chainsaws.
Smart. Yeah, okay.
Out in the woods, with Mike's warning still lingering in the air, Janet decides to tell David a horror story that she heard about two teenagers that went for a walk in the woods. When she gets to the climax of the story, the creature attacks and kills David while Janet runs off. Meanwhile, at the pond, we get a little bit of a show for the ladies as Jimmy jumps into the pond. Doreen reluctantly joins him in what turns out to be rather cold water. Back at the house, Nick and Stacy start to make with the sexy time. While Mike barricades himself in his room, only to be forced to listen to the sounds of Nick and Stacy in the next room.
I have to worry about getting any sleep tonight.
Back at the pond, Jimmy and Doreen are alerted to the presence of the creature stalking them when they hear a noise. Doreen freaks out a bit because Mike got her wound up earlier talking about the possibility of there being large, dangerous woodland creatures on the prowl. Spooked, Doreen convinces Jimmy to take her back inside where they can get warm and cozy. Unnoticed by them are several bubbles in the pond nearing them, but they make it safely back inside before the creature can get them. Doreen and Jimmy are making out in the living room when the creature makes its way into the house and is creeping up on them when Mike decides to leave his safe room and does his Casey Jones impersonation. Jimmy has just about gotten his pants undone when Doreen sees the creature. She screams and knees Jimmy and his jimmies, trying to get up and get away from the creature. Mike screams in surprise as well and drops his bat. Jimmy, for his part, did not see the creature and blames Mike for getting kneed in the balls. He then jumps at Mike. The two have a struggle while Doreen tries to gather up her clothes, which are in a trail to the basement. Blondes.
Are there sharks? Sharks?
Bye, Mike.
Did somebody say sharks?
Hearing the racket downstairs, Nick and Stacy come to see what's going on. Jimmy tells Nick that Mike was trying to scare everyone dressed as Mike Myers, and then they hear a scream from Doreen as the tentacle grabs her. They find Doreen unconscious in the basement, but unlike Bill Murray in Ghostbusters,
He slimed me.
Doreen is okay. Mike is convinced that it was an alien, and Stacy chews him a new one, saying that movies are just movies and that there are no aliens, axe murderers, or monsters on the loose. A cat falls from above into Stacy's arm, and she says that Doreen must have tripped over the cat. Everyone starts to head back upstairs, but Jimmy sucker punches Mike and then locks him in the basement. Mike panics and is banging on the door when the creature comes out of hiding and charges him. Mike jumps out of the way and gets a hammer from a work table. He hits the creature and tries to flee. The creature grabs him by the leg and Mike grabs onto some pipes. The pipes break and water starts flooding into the room. Mike gets up and heads to the basement window, smashing it when the creature rushes towards him. Cut to the next morning. Stacy is cooking breakfast and Nick goes outside to enjoy some fresh country air. Jimmy comes down saying that Doreen has a headache. Nick comes back in to wash up before breakfast and discovers that they have no water pressure. They then remember that they left Mike locked up in the basement all night. Opening the door to the basement, they discover that it is partially flooded and that there is no sign of Mike. Stacy then asks the question, has anyone seen David or Janet? Jimmy says that Mike has convinced Janet and David to go along with him to scare the others in a prank, and Nick says that it isn't funny and he now has to leave to go get a plumber to fix the damaged pipes in the basement. Since there's no water in the house, Stacy says it's time for a swim. Jimmy agrees and goes to get his swimsuit. And here we discover the advantage of hiring a bikini model for your movie. Back in the house, Jimmy sits on the bed and strokes Doreen's hair. A tentacle then punches through the bed and pins him to the wall. Doreen screams in terror, and out at the pond, Stacy hears the screams and comes running to see what's going on. Mo Fuzz would be proud. Green lasers shoot out of the creature's eyes, hitting Doreen's eyes and knocking her out. Nancy runs into the house and opens the door to see the creature. She turns and runs, locking herself in another room. The creature gets through the door, and Nancy jumps from the window out into the pond. Once she makes it back to shore, she runs into Mike. He's full of I told you so's. Mike asks about the others, and Stacy says that she hasn't seen David or Janet, and it looked like Jimmy and Doreen had both been attacked, and she wasn't sure if they were okay or not. Just then, several tentacles reach around a tree and try and grab them. Mike ties them into a knot, and he and Stacy head back into the house. They go upstairs to check on Doreen and Jimmy. Doreen is okay. Jimmy, on the other hand... Trust me, readers have the better face-melting scene. While Mike is being grossed out, the creature enters the house and grabs Stacy and starts to put his finest moves on her. She screams and Mike comes running. As the creature pounces, Stacy kicks it off of her, and Mike hits it with a pair of limb cutters. They then run into Mike's room and lock the door. Stacy says that the creature can chew through the lock, and Mike grabs a can of shaving cream and squirts it through the keyhole. Oddly enough, this works, with Mike observing,
But I'll stop him for now. Nobody likes a mouthful of shaving cream. Are you?
The creature leaves for the time being, and Mike and the girls start monologuing. Mike comes to the conclusion that the creature wants to use the men for food and the women for reproduction. Just then, Janet returns, and they try to warn her that there is something there trying to kill them. Janet collapses from exhaustion, and Stacy decides that they need to go to help her. Both she and Doreen sneak downstairs and outside and help Janet back into the house. Doreen helps her to the couch in the living room, while Stacy sees the phone and decides it's time to call for help. Just as Stacy reaches for the phone, it is smashed by a baseball bat. Stacy turns to see that it is Doreen. Doreen's eyes glow green. She's under the control of the creature. While Doreen and Stacy fight, the creature shows up and it gets a little tentacly with Janet. Not Japanese tentacly, but it does try. And just as it's about to turn Japanese tentacly, Doreen accidentally hits Janet with the bat and kills her. Mike then shoves Doreen out of the way and sprays the creature with shaving cream. Once again, it flees. Stacy gets up, and before she can thank Mike, Doreen jumps her. The two stumble towards the sliding glass back door and crash through it with Doreen lying conveniently under a loose piece of glass, which then decapitates her. Mike and Stacy then head to the basement since Mike saw the creature climb up on the roof. He's trying to get far away as he can. Once there, they start boarding up the door and window. Several hours later, they hear Nick return and start pulling the boards off the basement window. Nick goes into the house before they can warn him. Inside, Nick sees Janet's body and is shocked. What's going on? Then the creature jumps out to get him. Nick dodges out of the way and uses the cat as a distraction to get past the creature. Once outside, Nick meets up with Stacy and Mike, and they all get into the car. They start to drive off when the plumber arrives, blocking the driveway. The creature then jumps onto the car hood, and Nick puts it in reverse and tries to shake it off. The creature then starts shooting its mind control laser blasts at them until Mike puts on a reflective pair of sunglasses and reflects the blast back at the creature. It goes flying off the hood, but before they can realize where they are heading, they drive into the pond. The car begins to sink, but Mike, Stacy, and Nick get out okay and start swimming for shore. The plumber comes running, commenting on the sanity of our protagonists. Just then he is grabbed by the creature and it chokes him to death. Our heroes then make a run back to the house. Once in the house, they begin to set up a trap for the creature. Mike says that they need every mirror they can get their hands on. Also, light bulbs and flashlights. They all then set to work. Once they have everything ready, they turn off the lights in the house and use one of the flashlights to attract the creature's attention. It comes into the house, and by shining lights on the ground, making noise with dropped light bulbs, and using the reflections in the mirrors, they trick the creature into going into the stove. Mike closes the door to the stove, but it has a glass window so you can watch what you cook. The creature breaks the window, grabs Stacy, and starts pulling her towards the stove. Nick moves in to help her, but the creature zaps Stacy with its mind control beams. Stacy then grabs Nick by the family jewels and tries to impale him with a knife. It's the only moment in the film that you see the actress playing Stacy look happy. Listening to the DVD commentary, you will find out that the rest of the cast found it to be a chore to work with her, as she found that making movies was not to her taste and tried to get out of making the film after about a week of filming. So I'm not sure how much of this is acting and how much of this is her acting out. You be the judge. All the while, the creature is shrieking as it is being cooked alive. There's a small explosion that knocks Mike into the living room, and then a bigger explosion that kills the creature. Mike, Stacy, and Nick then get into the plumber's van and drive off back to the city. And there you have it. There's nothing out there. A self-aware horror movie from before when that became a thing. Once again, I'll warn you that this is grade Z schlock, but it does try to rise above its limitations. There's some fine camera work and editing in the transitioning between scenes. I enjoyed the humor when I first saw it, because at the time this came out, no one was really doing that. Today, it will probably seem like old hat, but if you appreciate film history, this is one of the first films to do that sort of thing. It was written and directed by Rolf Koneski, known for this and a bunch of other low-budget horror movies and some soft-corn Skinamax type movies. I can't say that I've heard of any other films on this resume other than this. Still, he has kept busy in the industry. It stars Craig Peck, John Carhart III, Mark Culver, Jeff Dacus, Wendy Bednards, Claudia Flores, Bonnie Bowers and her lovely bikini, and Lisa Grant. No one's going to win any Oscars here, and none of them went on to much notoriety. In fact, this was Bonnie Bowers' only foray into the film industry. I've seen claims that this is a cult classic, but unlike Killer Clowns from Outer Space or Near Dark, I don't hear any buzz for this movie. It's silly, and it has some good ideas. Also, Miss Bowers does indeed look good in a bikini. And considering that Koneski was 20 when he made this, it is quite well directed. The thing that really hurts this movie is the fact that there have been many big-budget horror comedies since it came out, and so you might feel that you've seen all of this before, and done better as well. All I can say is that, if it wasn't first, it was near there, and should be viewed as laying some of the groundwork for those that followed. This movie was not rated in the US, but it has graphic violence, some profanity, nudity, and sexual situations, so it's not for the kids. There was no theatrical release. It went straight to VHS, so there are no box office numbers. It has a 5.7 out of 10 on IMDb, which is meh. There aren't enough movie reviews on Rotten Tomatoes to get an official score, but most of the audience reviews that I read were generally positive. I myself, I think it might be worth your time. Check it out. Once again, thanks for watching. Until next time.
It's one small step for man,